There was another door that opened, and that was the world that we had no idea existed. And that was these brickyards that hold thousands of millions of Christians. They're slaves essentially to these brickyards, and it's generational debt.
It was really shocking and a bit terrifying. We couldn't believe it. We were thinking, okay, what is the debt that would keep a family enslaved for generations? And this family's debt was about $600 or $700 US.
Wow.
Think of that, $600 or $700 US. But it was in Pakistan rupees, they'd never pay it off. Question, well, how do you get people out of there? How do you pay off their debt?
Welcome everyone to the show, No Longer Nomads. I'm your host, Josh Doyle. We have a very special guest in studio today, and it's Bruce Peppin. I work with Bruce. He is over an incredible initiative that I'm excited for you guys to hear about. And Bruce, thanks so much for joining the show.
It's great to be with you, Josh.
Awesome. Well, for those of you listening, we do release episodes every Tuesday at 5 a.m. So make sure to like, subscribe, give us a 5-star review. And we're so thankful for you to be here to watch this conversation. Feel free to watch on YouTube, or you can listen. We do audio on Apple and Spotify. And so, and then video, you can do that on Spotify or YouTube as well. So make sure to like and subscribe. But Bruce, welcome to the studio. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, Josh.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about what you're working on in Pakistan, and how this came on your radar.
Well, I'll tell you, Josh, it was a super eye-opener for me. I had no idea what we would experience when we got further into a ministry in Pakistan.
Yeah.
It came through an outreach that we do on Facebook called 838, which is a prayer ministry for persecuted believers. And we got a short message from a young fellow in Pakistan thanking us for bringing the plight of Christians that were persecuted in Pakistan before a larger audience. And so that started a little conversation back and forth. And he talked about a young Christian girl, probably 13 years old,
okay,
who was kidnapped by a Muslim man in his 40s who was already married. He kidnapped her and forced her to convert to Islam and marry him. It was all a fraud. But she was lost to her family. And 5 months later, they tracked her down and rescued her. Mm. And she had been chained to a bed all that time, was malnourished, and really just sex trafficked. So he shared that story. And then when we talked about it with our team, your dad was saying, man, we got to do something. Can we just help this young woman? And so that began. So we initiated some further contact, and then we helped provide some nutrition, some food in the rescue. And only 10% of these Christian girls, there's over 1,000 or more that this happens to in Pakistan, but only 10% are ever found. So she was a miracle girl. So we got her out and was taking care of her. Then she was pregnant. And so we walked with her through that pregnancy, and she gave birth to a little girl. And it was a blessing. But so we've stayed with her now for many years. So she was 14 when she gave birth. Now she's 18 years old. An amazing story. But then that opened a whole world that was unknown to me, and I think to our whole team, of what was going on with persecuted believers in Pakistan.
Yeah.
It was really shocking and a bit terrifying.
There was another door that opened, and that was a world that we had no idea existed. And that was these brickyards that hold thousands of millions of Christians, they're slaves essentially to these brickyards, and it's generational debt that they're stuck into. So why is no one talking about this? And how did this come on our radar?
Right. So as we began this relationship in Pakistan, we began to learn more about that culture. And so that you've got, with this Muslim majority nation, you've got them there, the hierarchy, the 2% or so of the population are Christians. But because of their faith, they're relegated to the lowest class. And so they can't really get good jobs. They're the lowest of the low, street sweepers, garbage collectors, working in the fields. So if they ever have a problem, typically a medical emergency, they don't know where to go. They can't get a bank loan. They don't have bank accounts, no credit cards. So it's just cash only. So they're desperate. They can't find it. So what they do is they'll go to a Muslim brickyard owner. And he's a man that's very wealthy. They're like mini warlords in these remote areas. And he'll say, okay, I'll pay your medical debt, but in order to pay it off, you've got to move, you and your family, you've got to move on to my brickyard, and you're going to live here until you pay it off. So what happens, though, is through that debt, through high interest rates, fraudulent bookkeeping, and low wages, meager wages, they never get out of debt. And so we began to learn about this, and then our contact over there said, we have grandchildren paying the debts of their grandparents. It's just shocking. So as we got to know more and more about that, we couldn't believe that it even existed. And so it's like Israel and Egypt, where they had to make bricks. And so this is an industry. It's formalized in the country. They have the slave owner, the brick owner union, and it's the industry that produces their building materials. And so the plight of Christians are there. Just unbelievable that it even exists today. Gosh. And so they live in little barracks, little mud, maybe one room barrack made out of these mud bricks, no electricity, no running water. They cook over a little fire, and it just the most primitive conditions, and they never get off it. They will never get out of there. Then they're uneducated. They don't read or write, and they work 6 days a week. It's just, we couldn't crazy. Even believe this existed. Yeah. And so that pulled us in to a whole nother level of engagement in Pakistan.
Wow. So what are working conditions like? They have family members there. What are like the little kids doing? They're basically born into this as well. Are they just there with their parents all day? Are they getting maimed and all that? I mean,
Well, it's so shocking, and I'm glad we're able to talk about this because we don't have any concept of that here, especially in the West. But when you enter that world, it's beyond belief, really, what they have to go through. But he moves his family. They live in the brickyard. They never leave it, but then the whole family is committed. So it's the mother, the father, and every child. They don't care about child labor laws. There are no laws. Yeah. So the kids have to make bricks too, and they don't have any protective gloves. There's no materials, rain or shine, and they get hot weather over there. They're out there, doesn't matter how hot it is, 6 days a week. And one of the stories we found out early on is it was a family that we identified or through our contact that this is a family that wants to be rescued, because that was our question. Well, how do you get people out of there? How do you pay off their debt? And one of the families early on that we paid the debt of this family, and we couldn't believe it. We were thinking, okay, what is the debt that would keep a family enslaved for generations? And this family's debt was about $600 or $700 US.
Wow.
Think of that, $600 or $700 US. But it was in Pakistan rupees. They'd never pay it off. So we rescued this family, and as we got to know them, we found out that one of their daughters was a toddler, maybe 4 years old, and she was running around by her dad. She was too little to do anything, but running around out there dad was making bricks, and she didn't notice a truck that was coming. She just ran out into the road. The truck in the brickyard ran over her and crushed her legs. And because the father owed that brickyard owner money, he would not let her have any medical treatment. No painkillers, no medicine, no doctor. He just said, okay, take your daughter back to your little brick hut. Gosh. And her legs grew twisted and deformed. And again, heartbreaking. But after they were rescued, one of the things we did was began medical treatment for her, and we come alongside her family. And so this has now been a few years, and we have some before and after pictures. But to see what God can do to somebody that's set free, so her little legs were crushed, but they couldn't even do a surgery on them because there was no circulation. It was just too damaged. So a lot of it's just been trying to help her little system get strong enough. And we've been working with her and her family on that. And so we're prayerful that we can get her some surgery that'll help her to get her legs working and perhaps even walking again.
Wow.
So it's quite a plight. And then you get introduced to all these different families, and that we're able to rescue families from slavery. Think of that we can, with some effort and some funds and resources, we can come alongside a family and rescue them from generational slavery.
Wow. It's incredible.
Pretty phenomenal.
So a lot of the listeners for this show, young families, and so I thought this would be a good episode for them because, not to paint a picture of what's going on around the world and some other parts that we may not be familiar with. Like we had no idea. This is now on our radar and just we're so blessed to be here and so incredibly blessed to have all of these basic needs cared for. And this isn't a show to like growing up, it's like, eat your food. There's people around the world that,
right.
that don't have food tonight, which is very sad, but it's not to guilt anyone. It's just to go, wow, let's point a flashlight on this because there's a lot, of families stuck in slavery here. And so would love to raise, awareness for that. So what does the rescues look like? What does that look like? So there's someone that says, hey, I want to help out. What does that look like for someone?
Yeah, well, Ed, the amazing thing is very little goes a long way over there. And so we have people that are helping us in a lot of different ways. But the process is there with 2 million believers scattered across all these brickyards. Amazingly, God has these little pastors, humble pastors that have a burden for each brickyard. And they're in the poverty level, but they're not enslaved. And so God has his pastors ministering to those people on the brickyard. And then they communicate to our team in Pakistan. We say, we think this family and this couple would be good candidates. Their faith is strong. They're holding on to God. And we think they'd be a good candidate. And so we interview them. They're handpicked. And our contact there says they're God's chosen. Can you imagine out of the millions, God goes down and reaches and plucks out this family. We just had a recent family who had 6 daughters, the father, the mother, and 6 daughters from maybe 13 down to 2. Now, the tragic piece, if those daughters didn't get rescued, they would be subject to physical and sexual abuse. Just one of those harsh realities. Yeah. But to get them out, so then they're selected, and then when they're brought out, the debt is paid. In fact, it's pretty cool because there's a legal document that is prepared. So this is all above board legally in their system. And we have a legal document that's signed. Now, most of the time, the fathers are illiterate.
Okay.
They just don't know how to read and write. They've never been taught or educated. Sure. So they do a thumbprint. They put a thumbprint on the document. This is me. And then the slave owner will sign his name. And we've got pictures of a slave owner counting the money like this, looking at that, signing the debt. And then we've got a photo of families holding their certificate of release. Their debt has been paid. And it was just like, Lord, what an image of what you've done for us. We've been enslaved. We in the worst conditions, separated and all that. Our debt has been paid. So there's some meaning on some very profound levels. So they hold up this certificate of payment. They're set free. Then they're taken into a place to live. If they have relatives, okay, they go live with them. But for the last 2 families we've rescued, they didn't have any family. So we've put them in a little apartment. Now, when I say apartment, I mean, this is a small little place where they can live. But all of a sudden now they have running water, they have electricity, but they don't have anything. They don't. So dishes or even little cook surfaces or a chair or a cot even to sleep on. So we provide the clothing, the supplies, all that they need. And then we talk to the father and we say, well, what would you like to do? What are you interested in doing? And we come up with a little micro business for him. And so I think the last guy, it was called a transportation rickshaw. Huh. You've seen some of these rickshaws, but this one's like a little motorcycle, and it's got a place for people to sit behind it. It's like a little taxi.
Yeah. Okay.
And he could earn money. And so we break that cycle of slavery and in poverty so they can earn money, and then they're independent. And then we stay with them with follow-up, with encouragement. And the amazing thing with those girls, they're going to have a tutor. We're going to tutor them so they can get prepared to go and be educated. Yeah. And we're breaking that cycle. So then those girls will stay out of poverty and then eventually marry a young man, another Christian man, and then they both will rise up further and avoid repeating that cycle. And so we just see so many blessings from that with the follow-up. And the other piece that is significant is our contact. We'll call him Salmon.
Yep.
Tremendous young man in his 30s. Imagine that. But his grandfather was a slave in a brickyard.
I didn't know
his history. So he had slavery, but his grandfather was rescued by a Presbyterian minister who was way back in the day when Pakistan was much more open.
Okay.
And that Presbyterian minister saw in him this man of faith, and he wanted to give him a chance. So he rescued him, paid the debt, brought him into his school, and educated him. Well, then Salman's father was born into that Christian school environment, educated, became a teacher himself, and then passed it. So here now Salman, the grandson, is rescuing families.
So cool.
Powerful stuff. So for everyone watching and listening, it's the gripping challenge facing with Christian persecution, but to see God at work. And that's a thread we see constantly in the most extreme situations. God always has his faithful people there. He's delivering people on that personal, individual level. And I think we can, a takeaway for us is no matter where we are even today, God's personal. He's dealing with us name by name, location by location, working out his plans in our life. And we just see it in such dramatic ways in Pakistan.
Wow. So we've talked a little bit about life inside the brick factory. Do you have a sense of, you said 6 days a week, is that right? 6 days a week they're working? What does that look like? Is it when the sun's out, they're working sun to sundown?
It's like a dawn to dusk.
Okay.
And we're told as Salman goes out with his team, these are, they're like warlords. Their word rules. I mean, they can kill, they do anything. But he says you enter into this brickyard in the depression. It's almost like a wall, a spiritual wall of oppression. Boom, you enter this place of evil where just so much suffering. But what they'll do is they then, if they're going to rescue one, then they go through that whole process. But for a lot of them, what they'll do is they'll say, we're going to conduct a worship service. They get permission from the slave owner, and then they will get a giant tarp and have 100, 200 people out there, and they lead them in worship. And here are these enslaved believers worshiping God, hands raised in the air, giving thanks to God, even though they're enslaved. And so they sing and they hear the word of God. Then they follow up with, we feed them. Then they're all fed. And in some cases, in the winter, we'll provide blankets, or there'll be jackets and different things, gifts that we'll give them. And so then they're ministered to, even if we can't rescue them all, we're blessing them. And so that is one of those little moments when the 6 days a week, on the Sunday, let's say, they'll have that service, and they'll be encouraged. And we've even gotten permission to do medical clinics. That there are a few Christian doctors, and we've gotten a Christian doctor who'll go out, and we set up a tent on these brickyards, and they've never been to a doctor. Can you imagine?
That's crazy.
No child, no parent ever been to a doctor. But what we do is we invite the Muslim owner and his family to come to the doctor. We feed the Muslim owner, and we take some of the food over to his family, to him and his family, and we invite them to meet with the doctor and get medicine. So here you've got this oppressor, the one who's doing evil, and yet we're showing that God's love can reach even to them.
Yeah.
But we do these medical clinics, and the line is just long, and the moms are there with their little babies or the fathers, and they get all these terrible injuries and wounds. That's just not a hygienic environment.
Yeah.
And so again, medical, another touch point of just how God can reach down and help them. Yeah. So there's a lot of ways in the midst of a 6-day dawn to dusk life. And so those are just bright spots to us where God is able to reach down and touch these people in different ways. Now, there's another side to this too. Yeah. We talk about the Brickyards, but we're looking at breaking generational patterns. So the role of women in Islamic societies is not good, especially if you're Christian in a very strong Islamic society. So we have graduated about 160 young girls. When I say young girls, I mean they're teens up through their 30s. So young women would be better. But we are teaching them skills, how to be seamstresses and beauticians.
And how did this start? Okay, so this is incredible too. This is
another big piece,
another big piece of the ministry, another testament to just microfinancing coming alongside. Little goes a long ways over there.
Goes so far. Well, it was just the doors that opened. Yeah. We walked through one. Okay, Lord, are we doing what you want us to do? Well, the Brickyard's amazing. Well, then we find a whole nother world of need. So what happens? Okay, we talked about the formal slavery. Well, then there's informal slavery going on. So a Christian dad, he's a street sweeper. Okay. But his wife has a medical emergency, let's say. He has no money to pay for it. So he'll go down the street to a Muslim man that he knows. And he'll say, you know what? I wonder, is it okay? Could I borrow whatever it is, the medical fees? And the man will say, okay. But then there's an arrangement. So then to pay back the fee, the Christian man will say, well, my daughter will come, or my wife will come, or my several daughters will come and clean your house. There'll be maids in your home to pay off the debt. So that's a soft form of slavery, but still these young girls then, they become housemaids, paying off a debt that, again, never gets paid off. And we discovered that there were so many of these Christian girls, and they don't have a chance anyway. But then their fathers, through financial need and desperation, they have them pay off the debt. So then we realized, what do we do? And in talking with Solomon, he said, well, our vision is we want to train these girls so they have a job, a way to get out of poverty, a way to contribute funds to the family so they can avoid all this. So that began. We have 6-month classes now, 6 months to be a seamstress and a beautician. And it's a full-on class. We rent a building and these girls come. It's amazing. And they're taught everything about it. And then not only just how to sew, but how to run a little business. And in the case of the sewing, at graduation, they have to have a 90% attendance and they have to do all this. But on graduation, it's a full ceremony like you'd have in graduating from anything, but they get the sewing machine. That they get a new sewing machine at the beginning. They get the sewing machine, a work table, they get an accessory kit and funds to begin. And then we follow up with them. So all of a sudden, their life has taken just unprecedented turn for the good. And then they have this little micro business. So just December, we always have a reunion. All the girls that have come through these classes, 160 of them now, and they all come. It's incredible. Wow. So again, another way. So what our prayer is that young woman, she's earning money. So that kind of puts her up a little higher. Well, then she'll meet a young man who's upwardly mobile. And together they could marry and then change the course of the future.
It's incredible.
And then their kids won't go, we just think this is big. Yeah. It's not just right now. This is generational freedom. Change and freedom.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so we're seeing that in just so many ways that God just opens these doors for us that we're just walking through.
So the housemaid informal slavery, there can be a lot of exploits there as well. Is that common? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's pretty sad, but it is common. Well, they don't even let them. Christians are considered unclean and infidels.
Okay.
By Islam in Pakistan. But so these girls are there, so they have to have a separate utensil, a separate cup to drink out of. And sadly, that because they're regarded so low, they're either physically abused, verbally, physically, or even sexually abused. And so
do they live in the house then, or are they coming and going?
They're going to come and go. Sometimes they may live, depending on the situation. Most of them, they'll come, they'll have certain hours every day, but then during that period of time, it could be the young men of the house, it could be the father, the uncle, whatever it is, but they are subject to terrible abuse. And a lot of the girls, or I should say a good number of the girls that come to these sewing classes or beauty classes, they're housemaids. And we're trying now with the skills they have to pay to get them out of housemaids and to break that cycle. So working at it from a lot of different angles.
Do you have, roughly what it would be in American dollars to rescue some of these women, some of these families? I think you'd said it's less
shocking.
than $1,000. And
it's less than $1,000. So you figure under $1,000, then you maybe double that to get them set up in the home and with the clothing and supplies. So on the Brickyard family, we're from $2,000, $2,500. But you think in the grand scheme of things, if I rescue them from $700 to $1,000, unbelievable. And then you double or a little bit more.
Yeah.
But these girls, maybe $200 to $300.
Man.
And so it's a lesser, maybe even lower than that. We had one family, if I recall, they were about $300. It wasn't much. So by our economic terms, it would be nothing, but it's everything for them.
Changes their complete,
because they'll make, if they're lucky, their fathers will make $100 US a month, 100 to 120, and that's just subsistence. So then if they have a $200, $300 medical bill, there's no way. God. So, but just to be able to do so much with such significant change is what has just been amazing to watch.
Wow. So for those of you listening, just, what an incredible privilege it is for us to be able to help out Uncharted. And so, for those of you listening, I just hope that this would inspire you and encourage you that there are believers around the world and one day we will see them in heaven, and completely different lifestyle here on earth. And so what an incredible way to shine awareness, which is what I love to get into now, is how can we continue? I mean, we had no idea this was even a thing, but how can we raise an awareness for others?
Well, I think becoming it more informed, and even because we're so busy, young families, it's just, it's for us, it's 24 hours, 7 days a week.
Oh, yeah.
But to leave God some room to expand our vision of what he's doing around the world, to not be discouraged, because you look at it, it looks like darkness is winning.
Yeah.
And it's like, God, where are you? But we have to remember that it's not a clash of superpowers. It's not Satan against God as if they're almost equal in superpowers. No, God is just infinitely more powerful. Satan he's just a boaster and a bluffer.
Yeah.
He tries to get us to think he's more powerful. It's like a crack in the sidewalk boasting that it's the Grand Canyon. So that what we're seeing in Pakistan is the power of God.
Yeah.
They see it. They are prayer warriors. You want somebody to pray for you? You get a persecuted Christian in Pakistan, and it moves the hand of God.
Wow.
So awareness of it, praying for them if God brings it to your mind.
Yeah.
Pray for these believers, but to take courage. God is working there in their lives. He'll work in our lives. No matter, there's nothing that's too extreme. And I could say, well, at least see, I'm not in slavery, but man, God, I need to hear from you. So it is an encouraging message at the same time. And if God moves and leads, it could be a family project.
Yeah.
Have the kids save some their little allowance, little coins. And what if they could contribute to rescue a family?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Incredible.
And
Incredible
I think,
to think about.
Well, and I think I could talk to your dad, but I think in some cases we could even provide a picture. We're not at that level, but there could be a way to personally let a family understand more if they wanted more information.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if they wanted to ever participate in some way, it's very personalized. So we could help personalize it for them if they wanted to help their kids understand more and allow God to stretch their prayer life. Maybe that little extra bit to say, Lord, touch these believers in Pakistan. Yeah. They're living for you. They love you. And they're going to have some crowns to present to the Lord.
Absolutely.
And some, gold, silver, and precious stones to add. But we can partner with them. We're all part of the body of Christ.
So another question I have here is, what do families face? What kind of struggles, what kind of realities do they face after they're freed, right? Sometimes families may not know what to do with their freedom. And is there stories that you know of that families just don't know what to do once they get out of these factories?
Well, if you can imagine living in slavery your whole life, you've been oppressed and abused, and you haven't been educated, and you've just been beat down. So all of a sudden, you're released, you're given freedom, and you're sent into a new independent place. So it's all brand new. Now we're helping them, but the father, he can't read, he can't write. He just puts a thumbprint. So we have to help him even understand. So they'll do a micro business like a little rickshaw taxi, could be a vegetable cart.
Okay.
It could be a little stand. We had one man that was a child laborer in a shoe factory, and he was just doing that. Well, we set him up as a little cobbler. He's got a little shoe shop, but he had to learn, how do you even buy things? How do you shop? How do you add up the money?
Yeah.
In the Pakistan rupees, what are the currencies? So we don't even know, but we start them. But several of these guys, they thrive. They're overjoyed. And so what we've seen with their expressions, they're so crushed. The emotions are flat. They're just, they're just staring. But after freedom, smiles start to break out. And then you start to see, and I think I've got a picture. There's one little girl who was just rescued, and they didn't have any clothes. She got a brand new dress for the first time in her life. She's 7 years old, and she's holding up this dress with this big smile. But there's another picture of her. I think you've got this, where it just shows her sitting, in slavery. So it's a before and after. So you see this little girl, just dull and lifeless. And then here she is holding this beautiful dress and her little smile. And so it's changing their lives at so many levels. Now we're finding that many of them have medical issues. So they don't wear protective clothing. They're in short rags, barefoot, hands, doing the brick making, the mud. They have to add a lot of chemicals, and they're in very extreme conditions with heat and all, but a lot of hepatitis, a lot of different diseases. So we've got to get them medical help to help overcome some of their problems. So there's a host of challenges, but rapid progress. And we haven't had a single family go back.
Wow.
We say they're never going to go back. And we follow up with them. We're just continually meeting and following up. And we had a couple of them have even gone back to the Brickyard in freedom. Can you believe that? We had a man, Kamar, I believe was his name. I can use his name. But he he had a little loader rickshaw. It wasn't a taxi. It was a little, like a tiny little, not a pickup truck, but it had a little flatbed.
Yeah.
He took supplies and he says, I want to minister to people that are enslaved, my people that were in slavery, and I want to tell them my story.
Gosh.
He went back. We've had 2 of them that would go back to the Brickyards, telling their story and ministering to the people. They've gone back. And I just think, wow, it's just such a blessing to hear their heart. And then they want to serve God. So those have been some stories where they come out struggling and then loving the freedom, and then they just take off.
That's so incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, just such, I think of my kids, like my 3 boys, and just how brutal that would be, how horrible, the suffering, seeing that 7-year-old, that's about my oldest age. And I think, man, and at that age, him getting his first outfit, it's just heartbreaking to think of.
And we have some pictures of children in the Brickyards just to see where they're at. But even in their little faith, somehow, I don't know how their parents do it, but they're instilling faith in the God of heaven, that he's the one that we hold on to in our life. And you see these little kids just bowing and praying. And I mean, it's when it's life and death, their faith that's all they've got.
Yeah, that's all they got.
So you see what God does in freedom, and they just thrive.
So good. Well, Bruce, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, it's great to be with you.
And guys, thank you so much for checking out this episode. Excited that you could hear this conversation, and so excited for the conversations in the future. And so every Tuesday we put out new episodes. Tuesdays at 5 a.m. we put out new episodes. So make sure to like and subscribe. And thank you so much for tuning into this episode of No Longer Nomads.